Hi, I'm Jeremy Hess with Akeyless, and in this video we're going to learn how to use the Github Actions community plugin in order to run a workflow that will update a MySQL database remotely using a MySQL dynamic secret producer. So, the first thing we need to do is, of course, as per the docs, is check the prerequisites, and we see that for JOT authentication, OAuth JOT authentication, we do need to have these permissions in our YAML file, and we are going to use that authentication option, so we're going to add that to our YAML file later. And the next thing we need to know is for dynamic secrets, in this case, we need to have JQ installed, and that's in order to parse the correct data. So the next thing we're going to do is talk about authentication. We have two authentication options here. We can either use the OAuth or JOT authentication method, or you can use an AWS IAM, and you can keep reading in the docs if you prefer that method. So what we're going to do here is first create our OAuth JOT authentication method, which I've already done, and I'll show it over here. So if I go to my authentication methods, if I go to GitHub auth, I see that we add the JSON web key URL, and we have a unique identifier as we do. And in this case, it's going to be the repository, which will be the organization/repo. We have our TTL for the token, and we are going to enforce requiring subclaims on role association. So if we head over to our access roles, we can go to GitHub role, and we see that we associated the GitHub authentication method with the subclaim repository equals the org/the repo, and we gave secrets and keys access only read in this case, because that's all it needs. So the next thing we're going to do is go ahead and head over to our GitHub repo, and this is where we're going to go ahead and set our workflow, which is going to run, and I'll explain that in just a second. The one thing that we need to make sure we have is our access ID saved within the repo as a secret. So if we go to settings, secrets and variables, actions, go ahead and click new repository secret, call it access ID like this or whatever you want, but in this case, access ID, and you're going to add the access ID of the GitHub auth. So that's what you're going to put in right there, and then you'll save it. And when you go back to the repo itself, we'll go ahead back into the file. And what I'm going to do is I'm using the previous plugin that was created by one of our customers, and that's why it's a community plugin. And we're going to take the access ID, which we have saved in our repo's secrets, and that is going to authenticate with GitHub. And we are going to then grab a static secret. In this case, the static secret is Jeremy Demo, and we're going to call it my RSA here. And the dynamic secret is MySQL dynamic secret, and we're going to call it MySQL dynamic secret. And we can see those two secrets here. If I go to secrets and keys, go ahead and find Jeremy Demo. This is the RSA key, which we can see here. It's a private key, and I'm not going to show the whole thing. And the next thing we need is the MySQL dynamic secret, and that's here. So what we're doing is grabbing those two, and then what we're going to do is actually use them to run the workflow. So here what I'm doing is I am creating, using this my RSA, using the RSA key, that secret, I'm decoding it, base64 decode, putting it into a PEM file in order for us to SSH properly into our remote machine. Now, the next thing I'm doing here is echoing the output of the MySQL dynamic secret, which comes as a temporary username as well as a password. And I'm using JQ to parse it, where it's parsing everything that starts with JWT underscore. And that is going to be saved to our GitHub environment variable. The next thing we're going to do here is just going to spit out the ID and password, the temporary ID and password that comes from here. And that's just to verify that it's actual. This wouldn't be done in a production environment. This is just for the test to show that we have our ID and password. The last thing that we're going to do is we are going to create a file called employee.sh. We are going to give it that first bin bash line, and then we are going to give it a second line of MySQL with the username that we're grabbing, the password that we're grabbing, all these are the temporary ID and password, and then we're going to run this command inside the database. So we're going to use the employees database, and then we're into the employees table, we're going to insert these values. And here we have the environment variable that's going to grab the ID. The other second environment variable is going to grab the temporary password. We are going to also give proper permissions to the PEM file that we created earlier with our private key. We're going to copy the employee.sh file, which we just created up here, into that remote machine. And we are then going to SSH again back into that machine, and we are going to run that script. So it will then update the table as we wanted with these values. So there's a couple things I need to do here. Right now, I need to go ahead and update these values. So we have a new table. I can show you how the previous one looks. Here are our 9 employees, and we're going to add a 10th employee. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and update this file, and then we're going to commit the changes, and it will run the workflow. So what we're going to do is we'll go ahead and change this name just to give it something different. And then we're going to go ahead and just update this IP address here. And the last thing we're going to do is commit our changes. So once we run this, hit commit changes, we can open up our actions. We can see that our workflow run is starting. Open that up. Great. And now we see that the job was completed successfully. We can double check here the variables where we see here the actual ID and password that was used to update the database. And here we logged in and everything worked as expected. So what we can do is go back to our MySQL database, run the command again, and there we see the last employee was entered in properly using that workflow. So that is how you use GitHub Actions, the community plugin, to update a MySQL database using a MySQL dynamic secret as well as pulling a static secret. Thanks so much for watching, and see you in the next video.